Hi, my name's Abby Rose, and I'm going to explain number 2 from exam 2 from fall 2012 for CSE2. For 2A, this is what we would like the end result to look like. You can see at the beginning and the end we have two simple statements indicating the start and the end of the program. For the numbers, you see it goes 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, and then 16. At first, these numbers may seem random, but upon closer examination, the pattern becomes more clear. You can look at it as seeing that there are 6 values, so this one could be value 1, value 2, value 3, value 4, value 5, and value 6. And to get, for example, value 2, you take the value within 1 plus number 1, and you get 2. To get the value in the third block, you want to take the value within 2 plus 2. To get the value in the fourth block, you want to take the value in 3 plus the number 3. To get the fifth one, you want to take the fourth value plus the number 4, so 7 plus 4 equals 11. And finally, to get 16, you want to take the fifth value, which is 11, plus the number 5, which equals 16. This program is definitely testing whether or not the programmer can pick up on a pattern and use this pattern to produce the output, as I will show in a little bit. To successfully produce this program, it is necessary to understand how to use for loops and how to integrate different variables within a for loop. These ideas are presented in chapters 4 and 5. Now we will go to Cloud 9 to actually work on this. So this is Cloud 9, and I have set it up just with basic information, my name, what the project is, what problem I'm doing, and I have defined a class and a main method. So now, for part A, I would first like to define variables that I'm going to use, and for the for loop I'm going to use I, so I define it as an int, and I'm going to start it with 1 because that is the variable we would like to start with, and then I also need to define the number that we would like to print out, which I'm going to call sum, and I'm also going to do that at 1 to begin with because that is the first number printed out. The easiest part to start out with is the two simple statements that I pointed out at the beginning, which are the indications of the beginning and the end. So that is the start, and then we can just copy and paste, and we're just going to change that to end. So now we have the boundaries for the thing. So next we are going to move on to the for loop. We set this up with the initial value being 1, like I had defined above, and since we have already defined I above, we can just write I equals 1. And we want I to be less than 7 because we had pointed out before that there are 6 numbers that we were trying to print out, so once I gets to 7, it is going to stop and the for loop will terminate. And to change I within the loop, we just want to simply say I plus plus, which means for every loop it goes through, it's going to do I plus 1. So first it's going to start with 1, and then I for the second loop will be 2, because 1 plus 1. And next we add these brackets around the loop. And within the loop, we want to print out the number. So we are going to do another print line. And in this one, we want to print out the sum. So we are going to do the brackets again, and then sum, and a closing bracket. But now, if we did this, sum would simply equal 1 for each loop, like I can demonstrate right here. If we compile it, forgot to close the main method in a main class, which are very important, so we're going to compile again. And it is also very important that you include semicolons because that is a prime example of a mistake that many people will make. And this compiles fine, but like I said, it's simply going to print out 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 for all values of I. So we have to change sum. Like I had said before, the value of sum changes with the value of I. As I increases, sum adds that value of I to the sum. So we could say that sum equals sum plus I. And for each value of I, that sum is going to change, and it will represent that change in the print statement. So if we compile this again, compiles fine this time luckily, and then print it, it's going to do 1, 2, 4, 7, 11, and then 16. So part 2a is complete. So this is the end result for part 2b, which looks much more confusing than part A was. With questions like these, it is important to think about what is going on for each line of this program. You can see that it goes 1 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 8. Then to print out these, you can see that there's 1 line for 1, 2 lines for 2, 3 lines for the 4s, 4 lines for the 8s. And then, which makes the program even more confusing, you can see that for each of the sections there are pyramids. So for 1 it's just 1, the 2 there's 1, then 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. After looking at all of these, it is clear that we will definitely be using for loops again. We're going to need a loop to determine which number to print, how many numbers to print, so whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and how many lines to print. The idea of nested loops is definitely being tested within this question, which is what is needed to change a certain variable while another variable is held constant, or 2 while 1 is held constant. This idea is also laid out in Chapter 5. Now we will go to Cloud 9 to work on this program. So we're back to Cloud 9, and I have my class defined and my main method, and we are going to do part 2b. The first thing we're going to do is define a variable called temp, which is going to represent the number that we want to print out. We're going to initialize the variable to 1 because that is the first number that is printed out with the program. Now we're going to make a for loop that simply prints out 1, 2, 4, and 8 because that is the easiest place to start. So we're going to start it out with I equals 0. And since we have 4 numbers printed out, we're going to say I less than 4, so that is when the program will terminate. And we want I to increment by 1, so simply I plus plus, and that will move it up by 1 every time. And we're going to say if I doesn't equal 0, temp equals temp times 2. So now the if variable is closed, and just to demonstrate what's going on now, we are going to print out the temp variable, and we are going to skip a line as well, except we want that within this scope. And we can just do 2 quotes to close it, and there we go. And I'm going to compile this. So we had an extra scope, which isn't a big deal, you just have to be careful with that. And see, right here it prints 1, 2, 4, and 8. Okay, so the next thing that we want to work on is to print the correct number of lines for each number. So we're going to use another for loop within the original for loop, and we're going to initialize that variable as j at 0, and we want it to go until j is less than I plus 1. So once I is done running, j will finish its loop and then everything will be terminated. And we are going to increment this by 1, so j plus plus. We're going to just do open, and then after both the temp and a blank line, we're just going to close that again. So now if we compile this, it works, and then we're going to print it, and you can see that we have 1 line for 1, 2 lines for 2, 3 lines for 4, and 4 lines for 8. Okay, and the final thing that we have to work on is to get the pyramid shape. So we are going to use, once again, another for loop, and we're going to do this one as k. So we're going to do int k equals 0. And for this one, we want it to run until j is done running. So like this, similarly to the one above, we're going to do k is less than j plus 1. And then we want it to increment by 1, so we're going to do k plus plus. We're going to open this, and then the tricky thing with this is to know when to close this loop, and you can see if we do it here underneath both those lines, and we compile and print, that is not what we want. That's printing all of them on their own separate lines. So if we put the scope rather not here, but in between temp and align, we can print them all in the right order. So you see we have 1, then 2, 2, 2, and so on, and that's the program that we want. The trickiest part about this is knowing which loops to use and where to put the scopes. Hi, this is Abby Rose again. Just to recap what I've gone over in this video, in part A we were focusing specifically on for loops and pattern recognition. To prepare for upcoming questions like these on exams, it is best to keep practicing for loops and to not get frustrated if you don't pick up on a pattern immediately. In the video you realize that I made a few simple, small mistakes, but these are prime examples of what can go wrong on an exam, and it does make a big difference because the program will not compile. It's important to remember semicolons, curly braces, and to make sure you're initializing all your variables in the for loop correctly. Just to keep practicing these, for loops will become very simple. So part B was definitely more complicated than part A was, like I said it would be. This question was testing your knowledge of for loops and applying it to the idea of nested for loops, which can get pretty tricky. I showed you a few examples of what can go wrong and how you can tell if it's wrong, but it is key to just keep an eye on what variables you're using, what value those variables begin and end at, and where you close your for loops. If you keep all of these in mind and practice a lot, you should get the idea of nested loops fairly quickly. I hope this video helped explain number 2 for you, and I hope you understand for loops now. This is CSE2.